updates. And our main goal today is to talk a little bit about, just a review of the format. Some of you are taking the test on Wednesday, the paper test on campus. So I want to go over that. I want to talk about the remaining class periods that we'll have, stuff like that. But let me go through the updates for this week. This is a B week, so that means that we've got formative today and also one on Wednesday. On Wednesday, if you are taking the paper test, you do not need to do the formative. I'll just get your attendance from you being at the test. So you don't have to worry about doing the formative on Wednesday. Actually, I put a notification when you sign into formative that if you took the test that morning that you don't need to do it. But if you still have yet to test because you're doing the digital test, then we're going to continue to do a few little review things, a few little tweaks and some things leading into the other date for the test. Progress reports go up this Friday. I don't think we're going to have a ton of grades in there right now. The grade for the Othello chart is in there. And obviously today we have the optional, if you were going to revise your Q3 question, that one is due today, I believe. So if you do that, I'll put those grades in, either from your first time you did it, or if you did the revision, I'll regrade it and put the updated grade in there. But this 6 weeks, we don't have a lot of grades because we're getting ready for the AP exam. And a lot of the practices are just for your skill building and not really for overall grades. Wanted to talk about teacher appreciation notes. This is Teacher Appreciation Week nationally. Actually, I brought show and tell today. WISD doesn't do Teacher Appreciation Week until next week. So basically it's a 2-week window because they don't want to have Teacher Appreciation Week whenever there's testing. STAR test is this week for like the bio and the history and algebra are this week. But anyway, I don't know if you guys remember when you were freshmen or sophomores, but it's been a tradition on our campus to do teacher appreciation notes, or through the English department, like we would print out teacher appreciation notes that students could write, and then we would organize them and put them in the teachers' mailboxes. We would wrap them up in little ribbons and stuff, but obviously we cannot do that this year. And so we were trying to think of a way that we could do that this year in a different way, like everything else. And so I brought for you some show and tell. Oh, I have to take my background off. This is my big bag of teacher notes. Take off my background because you can't see it. Oops, that's not the way. Okay, this is my big bag of teacher notes. Can y'all see my big bag? I've been teaching for a long time. This is my 28th year. So you can see that in here are all my notes from students for 28 years. This is from 2018. 2019. I keep them in little year packs there. See if I can find an old one. Oh, this one is 1996. That's old, right? That's older than you. 94. 2006. So why do I have this big bag of notes? That's what I wanted to talk to you about with these teacher appreciation letters. I keep them. I kept all of them. They're all here in this bag. A couple years ago, I had a student and he said, "Hey, my dad was your student years ago." And so we found his dad's note going all the way back to like, what, 1993 or something like that. We went and found it. So teachers keep them, obviously. And this is one of my prized possessions. I think if wherever it was caught on fire, I would probably grab these, because believe it or not, these have saved you a lot of grief because they've saved me a lot of grief. And the reason I say that is because whenever I have a bad day, and this year, you know how it's been this year. Had a lot of bad days. You don't really know it probably, except that one day I messed up the video super bad. But whenever I have a bad day, I come home and I just reach for a little pack of these and I read through a few notes, and it kind of does the job of, oh, look, these are so old. They're addressed to Miss Jones. That's my maiden name is Jones. How funny. Um, and so I just read these and I remember why I want to persist and why I want to work hard and why it's important to me to be just like a little bit of help for my students in their journey through education. And it kind of like makes everything better. It's sort of like the magic bag that makes everything better. And so I can look in at the notes and I can remember the students and I can say, okay, suck it up. I can do this, right? I can do this again. And there's a purpose and a reason for my life and my existence and my job. So that's why I save these. And so I'm telling you this because we found a way to do cards virtually this year. And this is just a demo because I know all the teachers keep their cards. They keep them for, probably the same reason that I do. But point is, if you scroll down to where you see teacher appreciation cards right here with a little apple, we found a way to do it digitally this year. And so if you want to, I don't think that appreciation is something that you should be forced to do. I think that's something you should do because you feel it in your heart. But think back over your years of high school, especially you seniors that are leaving. Think about who might have been instrumental in helping you to reach your goals. And maybe take a little bit of time and craft a nice note for them so that they know it before you leave. We don't have the opportunity to like drop into teachers' classrooms now, like we might at the end of a normal school year and just say, hey, I just wanted you to know I'm heading to this college, and or thank you for that time that you did whatever. But we're still going to continue the tradition. And so what we did was we created virtual cards. So if you could probably click right on here because they're already active. If you click on there, then you can, if you choose to, send, there's 6 different styles. You can pick whichever one floats your boat. And you can send it automatically to your teachers through email. So let me show you how it works. I'm gonna pick one. Which one should I pick? Which one do you like? Anybody
The
know a
one with the blue
preference?
one, bottom
The
left.
blue one? This one? Yeah, I like that one too. It's got like a hot air balloon. So then it just takes you to a simple Google form and it will remind you the style that you chose. And then it will say the form will sign your name. So you put your name here. So let me do an example one so that you can see how they turn out for the teachers. I'm gonna do one from Harold. I don't really have a Harold, but I'm gonna send it to Mrs. Ramos so you can see what it looks like on the other end. And then you put in your teacher's email address. Now you probably already have your teacher's email address, but if you don't, there's a directory. Like say you wanna write a note to a coach from a couple of years ago or one of your teachers freshman year or something, then you can just click right here and get their email from the email directory. This also works, I'm not gonna tell everybody this, but this also works with any email address. So if you have a teacher from another school or whatever, it should probably work. And then you just type in your message. So Harold's gonna say, thanks for everything. This is Ramos. Harold was a man of few words, so he's just gonna say that. You can make it as long as you want. There's space on there for whatever you want to say. Harold's also going to put in an emoji, which you can put into your message. And then you just hit submit and it will automatically go to your teacher's email. You can do another one, or you can go back and do like a different style if you want. You can do as many of these as you like, or you don't have to do any. I feel like it's sort of like when you it's a feeling that you should do it only if you have that appreciative feeling. If you don't, I don't think it's like legitimate kind of thank you or whatever. So I'm not going to make you do any. It's not for an assignment. let's see, in my email. Should pop in here, there it is. So then this is what it looks like when they get it. They won't be responding to you because of the system, the way that it's set up in the system. But I did match the theme of the card to the little emoji that comes out in the subject line. Like this one has a balloon. They don't have a hot air balloon emoji. I don't know why. Anyway, so then they open it and it looks like this. So then, you could see there's plenty of room if you wanted to really, really write something tear jerking or whatever. So anyway, that's how they work. And they'll be open from now until next Friday, because normally we just celebrate Teacher Appreciation Week for 1 week, like the name implies, but WISD likes to make it next week because then teachers can enjoy some of the surprises. Like some years they get a RASPA truck and they bring it on campus and we can go out and get whatever RASPA we want, or like they'll give you an umbrella or a tote bag or goodie bag, like stuff like that. So they don't do that during testing week, but technically it is Teacher Appreciation Week this week too. So if you wanted to, that's the way that we've come up with, where it's going to work virtually for people to do cards. So you're welcome to do that. The link is right there in Google Classroom for you. And hopefully you have some fun and continue that legacy that we have had going on for 20 years now, 21 years. School opened in 2000. All right, paper testers, I did that one. Reminder that if you're testing on paper, that is this Wednesday, 7:30, small gym. They will have the breakfast over there for you. So if you've really been missing those school breakfasts, you can get your pig in a blanket or whatever they're serving on Wednesday. I don't know what they're having, or you can bring your own breakfast.
At about what time should we show up?
About 7:30.
Okay, so we show up at 7:30 and then the test is like later.
Yeah, they want to start it around 8. They have to start it by 9. Yeah. So the thing is that they have to seat you, they have to get you your materials, they have to read you the general directions. I think Mr. Medina is giving the test. I'm allowed to go down and visit with you guys before the test. So I'll come down, probably Mrs. Salinas will come down too. She teaches the other section of AP Lit, and we'll probably visit and just wish everybody luck, and then we're not allowed to go in after that. So yeah, if you're there at 7:30, they also like to say 7:30 just in case you're running late. If you get there at 7:45 or 7:55, you can come screaming in, but that's not the best mental frame to be in to sit down and take a test either. So we just say 7:30, and there'll be some downtime. You can eat and kind of chillax. That's an old term. That's an old term, I know. Digital is Tuesday, May 18th. So between the test this Wednesday, we're not going to have class anymore on Wednesdays, but between the paper test and the digital test, we will have a class period or two, because we still have the digital testers going on the 18th. So down here, I put down what we're going to be doing on the remaining class period. So today we're going to go over the test a little bit, but especially multiple choice practice 4 that you should have finished for today. Next Monday, by then, I will have the essay questions that the paper testers did. Those are going to be sent to me. So I'll be able to access them. And on that day, we'll talk about that. Now, the people who already tested, we can kind of debrief about it, talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the passages. And then the people who are testing on the 18th can gain from that experience. So it's kind of like no matter where you are with your testing, that will be a good day to be in class. And then the last day that we will have together will be the 17th. That's going to be our final class. We'll do an overview. If you already tested, I don't think it's going to be necessary that you show up to that. It'll be more geared toward the people who are doing the digital test on the 18th. So I want to make sure everybody's got their tech right, make sure everybody, if anybody has any questions, that sort of thing. By the way, if you have not downloaded the app onto the device that you're going to use for digital testing, you are behind. That should have already happened. So go to where you have digital testers, go to where you have the icons here. If you're testing digital, you'll have either this one or this one here under this week, whatever you chose. There's a lot of things that you have to do to prepare for the digital test. You have to download, you have to practice, and so on. Next week, I have to start bugging the people who haven't downloaded and who haven't practiced, because the navigation on it is kind of, complicated. So you want to make sure that you can move through the test properly, that you know when things look right and when they don't, etc. So digital testers, if you haven't started that process, I think you probably should do that. I do have a dashboard where I can see who's downloaded and who's practiced for this test. So next week I'll have to start bugging people about it. I don't want to bug people, but I also want people to be prepared. I don't want people to try to sign in for the test when they haven't done all the preliminary stuff. All right, well, let us talk about the test format, and then we'll talk about practice 4. I didn't realize until it was too late that practice 4 had a passage from practice 3 duplicated on it. But we'll talk about the other passages that are on there. Those are all new. Okay, so if you look at the instructions here, you'll see that I did a quick screenshot of the basic overview of the test. We've talked about this many times. We've practiced all the sections multiple times, but just so that you have it in your head for Wednesday, those of you that are doing the paper test on Wednesday. This holds true also for the digital testers. It's just you have a little bit of extra time to prepare. Reminder that the first section that you'll run into will be the multiple choice. You'll have 1 hour. There will be 5 passages and 55 multiple choice questions, and 1 hour to complete them. So the passages will come from fiction, drama, poetry. I hardly ever see drama on there, but we've just recently been reading Othello, so no big deal there. There'll be at least 2 prose passages and at least 2 poetry passages. 90% of the time, it's 3 fiction passages and 2 poetry passages. That's 45% of your score. So as they're figuring out your overall score, like whether you made a 5 or a 4 or a 3 or a 2 or whatever, the multiple choice comes in at 45%. So that's 1 hour. After that, you get a break. I think the break digitally is 20 minutes. It automatically puts a timer on the screen for you, and you have to be back. So that's restroom break time, whatever, Red Bull, whatever you got going on. And then you come back. And so if you come back late, the free response will have already started and you'll be minus some time. In the paper test, that's not a big deal because you don't have a lot of distance that you're traveling. Usually you just sort of go outside, walk around a little, go to the bathroom right there in the breezeway between the 2 gyms. And then they call you back in for the rest of the test. So then the free response has 3 questions and you have 2 hours, and that's 55%. We've studied and practiced all 3 types of writing. Poetry and prose, we studied multiple and practiced multiple essays. So you cannot use any notes. The chart that you made, you can use it to study up till the point of the test, but you cannot use it on the test. So all that list of different titles and things that we've been using to answer Q3 practices on formative and stuff like that, you're not allowed to use that on the test, but you can look it over prior to the test. So there'll be a poem that you'll have to analyze, a piece of prose that you'll have to analyze, and what they call literary argument, which is basically your interpretation of a work based on the question. And that's the Q3 that we've been practicing. So that's it. That's all that there is on the test. Any questions about the structure? If you're testing on Wednesday with the paper test, you should bring your own pen and pencil. You do have to do the free response in ink. It has to be blue or black ink. They'll have some pens there, but they're being very careful at school about sharing pens. So you're not gonna be able to turn it back in. You can't borrow a pencil and return it. they'll just give you the pencil. So if you have your own certain kind of pencil that you like to use or certain kind of pen, then you can bring that with you. I would recommend leaving smartwatches at home. You can bring your phone, but they're going to lock it up in your backpack in the concession area between the two gyms. So you won't have access to any of that stuff. You cannot take food or anything to drink into the testing room. So you can have water, but you won't be able to take it into the room and have it by your desk or anything like that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else for paper testing. Some of you have tested before, but maybe it was last year and that was all online too. All right, the last thing I want to do with you today is go over multiple choice practice 4. So if you go to AP Classroom, you should have your results returned to you. You can open that up. I'm going to go through my slideshow here of the questions and talk about, just like I have with the other practices, I want to talk about strategies, things to notice, things, how to let things stick out to you when you're reading so that you might not have time to annotate. You can annotate on the digital test, but I think it takes time. So if you really, really feel like you want to mark something, you can. It is possible. And of course, on paper pencil, Wednesday, you can flip around in the booklet. So you can start with whatever passage you want. If it hits you and you're like, wow, I really understand that passage, skim it. I'm going to be able to get all those right, then you can do it. You could try to do it in order. I sometimes tell people that if you are working on the paper test and you run across a really tough passage, maybe skip over it and come back to it at the end if you have time, because it's all about getting correct answers. And the more correct answers you get, the higher your score will be. You do not get punished for wrong answers or blank answers. So it's to your advantage to go through answering as quickly as you can the greatest number of questions. So if you're reading through a passage and it's just horrendous and you don't think you're going to get any questions right, I say skip ahead to the next passage. Make sure you skip in your bubbling, like bubble as you test. Don't bubble at the end, you'll run out of time. That happened. Oh, that was horrible. I had a student one time that came back from the AP exam and he said, "You're going to kill me." I'm like, "What?" He said, "I didn't get to bubble any of my multiple choice. I answered in the booklet." And then they called time. So yeah, he made like a 2 on the exam. I thought he was gonna make a 4 or a 5. All right, so multiple choice practice 4. The first poem that was in multiple choice practice 4 is an Emily Dickinson poem. And it's about springtime, but it's not your usual springtime poem. Your usual springtime poem is like, oh, the birds are singing and the flowers are blooming and isn't spring lovely? And for this poem, it is not lovely. Spring apparently brings some memories forward that are not pleasant. We never know what those memories are, but we know that all these signs of spring that keep popping up for the speaker are not pleasant. And we know that because the bird that's singing, the robin, hurts. The sounds in the woods had the power to mangle her. So one of the things that should have popped out to you in this poem is that there are some anomalies. There are some things that this poet's doing that we don't see normally, besides the fact that spring is harmful. And that is the em dash. This is an em dash. When it's a double line dash, it works kind of like a parentheses. So what's between the em dash here and here is kind of parenthetical. And this person, Emily Dickinson, has a lot of them all over. She also tends to capitalize words that you would not normally capitalize. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time thinking about that if I'm taking the AP exam. I'm just going to make a little mental note. They're probably going to ask me about that. Anything that looks weird, anything where there's a shift or a change, they're probably going to ask a question. But the poem goes on. I'm just going to summarize because you've all read it. And it's just about how I wish spring would hurry up and get over with already because I don't really like it. And so let's go through the questions. Number 1, In line 21, failed is best understood to mean. I always go back to the line and just sort of take a gander at it after I've already read the poem once. So the bees are coming, the grass is growing, the daffodils, the birds. They're here though, not a creature, failed. No blossom stayed away in gentle deference to me. Okay, so they want to know how that word failed is being used. In this case, it means was absent. So failed can mean all of these in different ways, but in this case, it means that they all showed up. They all were present, and it's, you know, almost overwhelming for her. Line 2 and line 7, pianos most probably refer metaphorically to birds. And if you go back to the poem itself, you can figure that out pretty easily because the robin is mentioned here. You have to know that a robin is a bird. But then in the next stanza, she talks about how not all the pianos in the woods. Well, it's not normal to have a piano in the woods, so it's a metaphor for whatever makes music in the woods, and that would be a bird. But the robin is the one that mangles her the most. She says, not all the pianos in the woods had power to mangle me, but that robin does, because it's a spring bird. That's one thing we don't know in the valley. There's no robins here, really. Robin is the first bird that shows up in the spring. So in a way, it's cultural bias on the AP exam. One effect of they're here, though, is to emphasize the speaker's feeling of powerlessness. This is the first time that we notice that the speaker is not happy about the spring because of that line. They're here, though. I didn't want them to show up, but what can you do about spring? Spring shows up on its cycle. So they're here, though. What, I guess I better make the best of it, kind of thing. And that's the first surprise that we have on the speaker's situation, because we normally expect that poems about spring will be joyful and, you know, pleasant. And now we find out that for some reason it's harmful to her. Number 4, which of the following is a subject treated in the poem? A, this is a point of elimination. You know, if you're misreading, maybe you might choose C or D, but the best answer here is A, because it's the relationship between all of those different animals and the speaker and those elements of nature. Number 5, speaker perceives the coming of spring chiefly in terms of A, sounds and colors. You can just skim through the poem to understand that. Most of it's about the noises that the birds make or the colors of the flowers and the grass and that sort of thing. This is sort of an imagery question. Number 6, for the speaker, the robin and the daffodils have which of the following in common? C, the power to wound. Even if you didn't catch that the first time around, when you go back through on question 6, words like hurts, mangle, fear, and pierce start to come out to you, and you start going, okay, well, these elements of spring are damaging, almost physically, to the person. So C is correct there. Number 7, the first shout most probably refers to be the robin's song. I made a note here, and it's tricky because of regionalism. You know, I don't know that they would ask a question like that nowadays, but you know, if they write the test up in Pennsylvania, they think everybody has the same understanding of nature, and in the valley, we have a whole different crop of natural elements that they don't have up there, and vice versa. So if you don't know that the robin is the first bird, you could be disadvantaged on that question. Number 8, the central opposition in the poem is between D, the speaker, and spring. I think that's pretty obvious, but maybe it's also obvious because question 6 helped us realize it. Question 6 is about, you know, the qualities of nature and its effect on the speaker. Number 9, the speaker views the coming of the robin, the daffodils, and bees as painful experiences. Question 6 and 8 help us with that. So this is, I said this in practice 3, and it's just sort of like a little mental check. When I'm taking a practice test that I've never taken before, because they release one every once in a while, that's how I know I'm on the right track and I can feel confident about my answers, because usually one of the later questions in the series will kind of match up with the answer from a previous one or two questions. And then you can start saying, okay, if they're asking multiple questions with that same answer, my interpretation is accurate. I might not completely have it all worked out in my head, but if I can answer C here, then I can recognize that this one is a feature of me understanding that, and so is number 6, the power to wound. So the questions can help you better interpret the passages too sometimes. They can also support misreadings, unfortunately, but that's when I start knowing that, okay, I must be on the right track with my interpretation. Okay, second passage on practice 4 is the laters and the nows. I love this passage. It's so interesting. I feel like it's not difficult to read. When this one came up on the practice, I don't know, I think this is from 97. I was super excited because I felt like it was interesting, engaging, and not all the passages on the AP exam are like that. But this is a passage about, well, the premise is suppose that people live forever. Just imagine that everybody lives forever. And then the writer says, basically people are going to be broken up into 2 groups. The laters, in other words, I have forever to do that, so why do it now? And the nows, the ones who don't want to miss out on anything. I've got all this life and all these things that I could do. So the passage is basically about that. But the second half of the passage, remember I told you there's going to be a shift. And the shift comes right here. The nows and laters have one thing in common, because the first thing that happens is they describe the laters, and then they describe the nows. Neither one being better or worse, they're just like 2 personality types, right? But then it says they have one thing in common. They can never escape from their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-great-grandparents. The fact that we're mortal means that at some point we're on our own, right? At some point we make our own decisions. But if there's something you never thought about, if you were living eternally, everybody would be there to put their 2 cents in all the time. And so there's this idea that nobody ever comes into their own. And so the second half of the passage is sort of like the downside to living forever. Number 10, in context, the way a leaf falls from a tree suggests which of the following about the conversations of the laters. And that is that they're often random and casual. And you don't have to really go back to the passage. That's a simile describing the way a leaf falls from a tree is not in a pattern. It's based on the wind and the weight of the leaf and, I don't know, all these random variables. So bloop, 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 bloop. And that's the way that the laters have conversations, because why do they have to hurry through a conversation? They don't have to, their time's not running out. The use of the sentence and logic, and you can go back and use that to help you find that sentence if you need to. In the first and again in the second major paragraph suggests that the point of views are equally, and it's right here. Wait, yeah, right here. I highlighted it. These paragraphs are parallel to one another. Maybe when you read it on a time situation, you didn't notice that, but by the time I got to this line right here, and it was a direct repeat from this line, I could go back and see that the structure of those 2 paragraphs is almost identical. The qualities of the laters and the qualities of the nows. And this line helps to solidify that. Point being, neither one of them is more valid approach to life than any other. So it's defensible. It's something I can defend. I mean, I don't know which one I would be. Probably switch back and forth. But the point is that neither one is better or worse. It's just about personality types. The last sentence of the passage is characterized by, the correct answer is parallel syntax. Now I realize that that may or may not be a term that you're familiar with. If you took the language test last year, you certainly know the term syntax. It just means sentence structure. So the order of the words in the sentence. Parallel meaning similar. So the last sentence of the passage is the one that goes, millions, these few souls with their dear relatives looking on, dive into Lake Constance or hurl themselves from Monte Lema, ending their infinite lives. In this way, the finite has conquered the infinite. Millions of autumns have yielded to no autumns. Millions of snowfalls have yielded to no snowfalls. Millions of admonitions have yielded to none. So you can see that structure in that last sentence is repetitious. That's what they're asking you about there. So where is it? Pass it already. Yeah, here it is. So all they're asking, they're saying that that last sentence has similar structure. Millions of something have yielded to something. But it's hard to get that right if syntax isn't a word that you're familiar with. You might have put E. 13, the narrator implies that the situation in which the nows and laters find themselves is a kind of trap, because they come together in the second half of the passage and talk about how as great as it seems that you would never die, there are drawbacks. So it's a trap. If you answer dream, then I wonder if you read the second half, because the second half has like all the downfall parts. 14, both the nows and laters are portrayed as D, lacking individuality, because if you can break people into two groups, then they're all pretty much similar within that group. Nobody's really standing out as an individual. People like to say that all the time. There's two kinds of people in the world, right? I say that too. I say there's people who categorize people and people who don't categorize people. 15, what do the third, fourth, and fifth major paragraphs suggest about the relationship portrayed between parents and children? Well, I can either try to remember or I can go back and skim. If you are taking the digital test, I think what's going to happen is, this is why you want to practice. I think the passage will be on one part of the screen and your questions will pop up on the right. So the passage will stay there as you go through the different questions. You can just look across. If you're testing paper, you might have to flip back to the previous page, but they do try to reproduce it in the booklet if you have to go back. But I do recommend when they say, if you can't remember what was in the third, fourth, and fifth, go back and look at it. But they do suggest about the relationship between parents and children, which we've already noted is kind of like they're always going to be in your business. So B, it seriously limits children's autonomy. You have to know the word autonomy here to get that correct. And that just means on your own, right? Like making independent decisions. 16, from the beginning to the end of the second large paragraph, the passage is best described as an example of, now you've probably written examples of all these types of writing, especially in language, if you took the language AP class last year. Analysis of a process, cause effect, evaluative argument, anecdotal narrative. This is a classification because early in the passage, the writer says there's two kinds of people in this situation. And so classification means putting things into categories. And then he compares them. The people in the passage are characterized chiefly by description of their behavior. How they act in this scenario is based on whether they're a later or whether they're a now. I could see the secondary answer being B or A, but the best answer is D, because if you go back and look at it, the words that keep popping up are action words, like what they do in each group. Overall, the passage suggests that immortality, E, is as much a burden as a gift, because half the passage is about how people will act if they have immortality, and the second half of the passage is about the drawbacks of being immortal. And question 13 helps you with that. Number 19, in the sixth sentence of the final paragraph, the word dear might be read as ironic. That might have slipped past you when you read it until you got to that question. So I highlighted it here. This is where the person might, because of all of the weight of the past, the passage says, commit suicide, because your life is just never ending. These few souls with their dear relatives looking on. The dear relatives are the ones that they've been describing that are, you know, like bossy and involved in their lives. So dear is ironic because the reason they're committing suicide is because they can't get out from under those family members and their opinions. So the answer there is D. Relatives have driven the people to suicide. So they're not really dear. That's a sarcastic use of that word. 20, the narrator's use of the adverbs later and now as nouns signifying types of persons helps to emphasize the city dwellers' C, style of action. That's an easy question because it's sort of like how they behave as a result of their knowledge that they're going to live forever. All right, this is a big oops because I didn't realize I even put it right there. I didn't realize that that passage was on the previous test, so I apologize for that. I'm just going to skip over that one. That's the one about the guy I went out through all those answers on number 3. The guy who goes to church, but he doesn't feel the same intensity of religious excitement that the other people in the congregation feel. So I apologize for that. Hopefully you got them all right if you sat through class last week. All right, then we get to The Race, which is a modern poem. This is a poem that's about the speaker who is rushing to get to her father before he dies. But a secondary rush is through the airport to get on the last plane so that that can happen. And so there's a description of the rush to get to the airport, through the airport, getting to the plane, getting directions. Which way do I go, left? Do I go right? If you've ever been in a big airport, you know that's troublesome sometimes. And then it's a first person narrative poem. The person ends up on the plane and makes it, and you get the final idea that they finally get to see their father and he's still breathing when they get to the hospital. So it's a suspenseful poem, and all night she watches him breathe. That's a poem by Sharon Olds. In this poem, I think that one of the things that's important is the notes that they have there. If they have notes on the AP exam, they don't do that often. You need to read them because they're going to help you answer a question. All right, 35. Taken as a whole, the poem depicts a resolution of anxiety. Just in my description of what happens in that poem, you can tell that there's that anxiety that happens, that suspense until the ending when she finally makes it to the hospital. 36, in the poem, the speaker experiences all of the following except, so this is an elimination question. Whatever's left is my answer. She does not feel resentment in any way toward her father's illness. She's just anxious about getting there. She, in her haste, does fear that she won't make it. She's aware that she has, I mean, you wouldn't be rushing like that if you didn't have a tie to the person that you were rushing for. The limitations of her strength, she's kind of mad that she can't run faster or move more quickly. This feeling of dependence on others, she has to ask for directions and all that stuff. All right, here's syntax again. That came up earlier on the test. The syntax of the first sentence establishes the speaker's C, breathless desperation. What they mean by that is where at the beginning, notice that the first sentence is quite long. It goes to 5 lines. When I got to the airport, I rushed up to the desk, bought a ticket. 10 minutes later, they told me the flight was canceled. The doctors had said my father would not live through the night and the flight was canceled. So there's a lot of ands and commas in that sentence, and it sort of demonstrates the breathlessness you would be in if you were rushing. And it's sort of like random, all the things that are going on at that moment. So the syntax helps us understand that. The speaker's feeling that she is not in complete control is most directly suggested by the image of the bags. There's a comparison of her walking, she's running with her bags on the side, and the bags are kind of wobbling as she's running, and it's pulling her from side to side as she's running, and she knows she's not looking graceful or anything like that. And that image is imagery, right? So that's the bags. This is kind of a time-consuming question because you have to go back to them unless something stuck out to you when you were reading. The speaker's description of herself as a fish slipping upstream deftly against the flow of the river helps to characterize her action as purposeful and instinctive, like a salmon going upstream, right? So she's got a purpose, is to get to her father, and instinctive, she's sort of like bobbing through the crowd to get to her goal in the shortest amount of time. 40 in line 30, this refers to which of the following? They don't ask very many of these, maybe one on a test, but it's pronoun antecedent question. This you have to go back and find that and say, what do they mean by this? What is this standing in for? And in this case, on line 30, just scroll back. Goodbye to my body, goodbye to comfort. I used my legs and heart as if I would gladly use them up for this, to touch him again in this life. So she says, you know, she's not thinking about if her feet are going to hurt later or if her back is going to seize up or anything. She just wants to use up whatever energy she has so that she can meet her goal of getting on the plane. And the goal is to touch him again in this life. 41, like the one who is not too rich, I turned sideways and slipped through the needle's eye, as best seen as an example of. If you read the footnote, you know that's a biblical allusion. If you didn't read the footnote, that could be confusing. So that's why you reread footnotes. 42, in line 22, I, who always go to the end of the line, suggest that the speaker is usually A, not very assertive, but in this case, she is assertive because she's rushing to meet her goal. All right, then the last passage is about Altaf. This passage is about how a gentleman, it's from colonialism, right? When he's going back to his Indian roots and the people there don't even recognize him as one of them because he's dressed as a European, but he knows their language, and he spent a lot of time in other places. And so it's more of a character sketch than anything else as you read it. He's coming back to the place where he grew up. Which of the following best conveys Altaf's emotional relationship to his home village? This helps you also with the footnote because he would have been more comfortable traveling in a lungi, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it has to do with their clothing. And if you read the footnote, you know that that's a clothing piece, and he's not wearing that clothing piece. He's wearing just regular European clothes. And so if he was wearing that piece of clothing, the kids would have recognized him as one of them, but he doesn't. The narrator's comments about the children near the end of the passage divulge all of the following about Altaf except his A, exasperation. He's never exasperated. He almost finds it amusing that they don't recognize him as one of them. In the 6th paragraph, the description of the setting establishes a sense of familiarity and comfort, going home again. 46, the tone created by the use of italics and hyphens throughout the passage helps express which of the following perspectives. So there's another example, like we saw in the first poem, of noting when something's different because they're probably going to ask you a question. They didn't put it in quotation marks like they might have. This one has little dashes and also has italics. So the idea is that all of those questions are kind of being thrown at him all at once on top of each other, instead of sequentially like you might list dialogue. Also, there's a different language that they're speaking because as soon as he speaks in Bangla, then they know that he's one of them and they're surprised. So whatever they're speaking is a translation for us. So the question, 46, the children's excitement at the unexpected arrival of a stranger, also leaving out words and that sort of thing. Their excitement of talking over each other is depicted. 47, the events of the passage are ordered according to the familiar literary pattern of a journey home. That's a very stereotypical type of narration where somebody comes home and they're different, but they're also recognized by the people back home as one of them. So because of their journey outward, they're changed, but they're still essentially that person who left the home place. 48, in the final sentence of the passage, the pairing of the verbs balanced and leaped suggest what fine distinction regarding the character. That's when he gets off the boat. First he balances on the boat and then he leaps onto the shore to be back home. So it's about he is poised between two worlds, but eager to be home. So he has a balance between that outward world that he went out to experience and the initial home world and now he has to balance between them. His clothing demonstrates that too, is symbolic. 49, in the context of the 5th paragraph of the passage, the comment by Shiraj, they think you are an Englishman, suggests a conflict between C, the native Bengalis and English rule. If you know about colonialism, then you understand this is set in India. You don't have to notice that, but it's about the nationality and the description of his appearance. And colonialism, when the British people just went to India and said, we're your masters now. And the Indian people were like, we thought we were doing all right. Right. I think that's the end, right? That's the last question. Most people did pretty well. I didn't get a final score for that. I can post it later, but most people did well. There wasn't a single question that stuck out to me as something that was a question that was troubled everybody. So I don't want to put it up on the screen to try to get the average because it will give me people's individual averages. And I don't need to broadcast that, or maybe I can turn off the, I can turn this off and then. Let me see if I can go look. No, it turned off already. I don't remember my password. I just need to change it recently. I think it was pretty good overall average. Okay, I'm looking for the overall percent, so you can kind of know where you were in the class averages. And then we'll call it quits for today. Class average 28 out of 49. I can't do that math in my head. 57% is the average score. There were some people who didn't do it, but it's only counting the people who did, I think. That's still acceptable. I think if you do a 57, that's pretty close to 60% like we've been talking about. So overall, I think most people are on a good plan. If you want to do more practicing, just a reminder, there are a variety of different tools that you can use. Remember that I put some additional study resources. You can go and watch some of those College Board videos, which are here. You can also, there they are. You can also do another practice test if you want. I'm not going to make another practice test in AP Classroom, but there are some available on this link. You could read about the sophistication point for the essays. You could look over some study guides. You know what I'm going to put on here? I'm going to put the 3 rubrics for the essays on there just so that they're all together and you can look those over before the test too. Note to self. Is there anything else that I can give you that you think would help you, that you could look over before you test, like the night before or you know, leading up to the test? Anything you can think of? I hope you feel prepared. We've been doing every part of the test. I mean, there's certain things you can't prepare for. We don't know what the passages are going to be, but I think you're ready for whatever test they might give you. So, any questions before we go for today? If you did not turn in a revised essay today for the Q3, the one about sacrifice, then I'll just be entering the grade that you earned from the your first try at it. Those are due today. So if you still wanted to do that, you would have time today. All right, then I will see those of you who are testing on Wednesday. I'll come down and visit with you before the test. And those of you that, well, I'll see everybody back here next Monday. So we don't have a class on Wednesday. So I'll see everybody back here on Monday. and all the paper testers can tell us about their experience, right? All right. Have a good day, everybody. I'll see you in the next few days. Bye.
Bye, Miss.
Bye,
Have a good day.
Miss.
Bye, Miss
Have a
Ramos. Have a
good
good day.
Bye.
Bye,
You
Miss
too.
Ramos.
Miss.
Bye.